entitled parent stepdad ignored me at family dinner until I revealed his secret. Pass the potatoes to Sarah, honey, my stepdad Derek said to my mom, his voice dripping with the fake warmth he reserved for when his precious daughter was around. He didn't even glance in my direction, despite the fact that I was sitting right between him and Sarah, my hand literally halfway extended toward the bowl. I pulled my hand back and stared down at my plate, the familiar sting of invisibility washing over me. 6 months. It had been 6 months since Mom married Derek, and I might as well have been a ghost haunting their perfect little blended family dinners. How was school today, sweetie? Derek asked Sarah, leaning forward with genuine interest sparkling in his eyes. The same eyes that looked right through me every single day. Oh, it was amazing. Coach Martinez said I might make varsity soccer next year, Sarah gushed, her face lighting up. That's incredible. We'll have to celebrate this weekend. Maybe that new steakhouse downtown. Derek beamed like she'd just announced she'd won a Nobel Prize. I cleared my throat softly. Actually, I had some good news too. Mrs. Peterson said my history essay on the Cold War was the best in the class, and... That's nice, honey, Mom said absently, but Derek was already turning to his son Michael. What about you, champ? How'd that math test go? And just like that, I was invisible again. My words hung in the air for exactly 2 seconds before being completely steamrolled by Derek's selective hearing. Michael launched into a story about how he'd aced his algebra test, and Derek hung on every word like it was the most fascinating thing he'd ever heard. I tried again. Mom, I was thinking maybe this weekend I could. Michael, you're definitely getting ice cream after dinner for that grade, Derek interrupted, not even acknowledging that I'd spoken. What's your favorite flavor again? The conversation flowed around me like I was a rock in a stream. Sarah talked about her friends, Michael complained about his English teacher, and Derek responded to everything they said with enthusiastic questions and follow-ups. When I mentioned that I'd made honor roll again, Derek suddenly became very interested in refilling his wine glass. When I tried to join Sarah's conversation about movies, Derek immediately changed the subject to Michael's upcoming basketball tryouts. Mom noticed sometimes. I could see it in the way her eyes would dart between Derek and me, the little frown that would crease her forehead when his dismissal was particularly obvious. But she never said anything. She was still in that honeymoon phase where Derek could do no wrong, where his kids were just adjusting, and everything would work itself out with time. Except it wasn't working itself out. It was getting worse. At family movie nights, Derek would let Sarah and Michael fight over the remote while I sat in silence, my suggestions shot down before I could finish making them. During weekend outings, he'd pile his kids into the front seats of his SUV, leaving me squashed in the back with the luggage. Even at the grocery store, he'd ask Sarah and Michael what snacks they wanted while walking right past the things I liked. The worst part wasn't even the ignoring itself. It was watching my mom fall more in love with this man who treated her daughter like an inconvenient piece of furniture. It was seeing her face light up when he praised Sarah and Michael, completely oblivious to the fact that he'd never once praised me. But tonight felt different. Tonight, the familiar anger in my chest was burning hotter than usual, and I was getting tired of swallowing it down. Derek, did you remember to sign Michael's permission slip for the field trip? Mom asked, reaching across the table to squeeze his hand. Already taken care of, Derek replied, pulling out his phone to show her. I even packed him an extra 20 for the museum gift shop. I perked up, remembering something important. Oh, speaking of permission slips, I need mine signed for the AP history trip to Washington, D.C. next month. It's due tomorrow, Anne. Sarah, make sure you remind me to call Coach Martinez tomorrow, Derek said loudly, completely talking over me. I want to discuss your training schedule. The words died in my throat. I stared at him, waiting for even the smallest acknowledgement that I'd spoken. Nothing. He was looking at Sarah like I hadn't said a single word. Derek, I said more firmly. I really need that permission slip signed tonight. He turned to Michael. You know what, champ? I think we should sign you up for that summer basketball camp after all. Something hot and sharp twisted in my stomach. He wasn't just ignoring me anymore, he was actively drowning out my voice. This wasn't passive dismissal. This was deliberate. The deadline is tomorrow morning, I tried one more time, my voice getting tighter. If I don't turn it in, I can't go on the trip, and it's 20% of our semester grade. Derek reached for the salt shaker, his arm passing right in front of my face as if I wasn't there. Michael, pass me that salad dressing. I'll sign it later, sweetie, Mom said quickly, shooting Derek a look that he completely missed. Or chose to ignore. But I knew she wouldn't remember. She'd gotten so caught up in Derek's world, in being the perfect wife to her perfect new husband, that my needs kept slipping through the cracks. Last month, she'd forgotten to pick me up from debate team practice because Derek had surprised her with dinner reservations. The month before that, she'd missed my parent-teacher conferences because Sarah had a soccer game the same night. Sarah, tell me more about this varsity soccer thing, Derek continued, his voice warm and engaged. What position do you think you'll play? As Sarah launched into detailed descriptions of defensive strategies, I felt that familiar sensation of shrinking, of becoming smaller and smaller until I might disappear entirely. But underneath the hurt, something else was building. Something that had been growing stronger every day for months. I knew things about Derek that nobody else at this table knew. Like how he'd been staying late at work meetings that didn't exist. How he'd started password protecting his phone after leaving it unlocked for the first few months of the marriage. How I'd seen him having very intimate conversations with his coworker Jessica at the grocery store 2 weeks ago, conversations that involved a lot of touching and whispering and the kind of body language that definitely wasn't professional. I'd been carrying that knowledge around like a stone in my chest, unsure what to do with it. Part of me wanted to protect Mom from the truth. But sitting here, watching Derek perform his role as the devoted family man while treating me like I didn't exist, that stone was getting heavier. You know what? Derek said suddenly, standing up. This calls for a celebration. Sarah, Michael, how about we go get ice cream after dinner? Just the 3 of us. Some quality family bonding time. Just the 3 of them. Not the 4 of us. Never the 4 of us. The stone in my chest cracked, and something dangerous started leaking out. Actually, I said, my voice cutting through their excited chatter about ice cream flavors, I think mom should know where you really go when you say you're taking the kids out for quality family time. The words tumbled out before I could stop them, sharper and louder than I'd intended. The entire table went silent. Derek's spoon clattered against his bowl as he froze halfway through serving himself more mashed potatoes. What did you say? Mom asked, her eyebrows furrowing in confusion. Derek's face had gone completely pale, but he recovered quickly, forcing out a strained laugh. Kids say the darndest things, don't they? Always making up stories. I'm not making anything up, I said, my heart hammering against my ribs. I couldn't believe I'd actually started this, but now that I had, there was no going back. Last Tuesday, when you said you were taking Sarah and Michael to the arcade, I saw your car in the parking lot at Russo's restaurant. You weren't with the kids. That's ridiculous, Derek said, but his voice cracked slightly. You must have seen someone else's car. Black BMW, license plate starts with GHK, I continued, surprised by how steady my voice sounded despite the earthquake happening in my chest. You were with Jessica from your office. The same Jessica you've been texting at all hours. The same Jessica you told mom was just a work colleague. Sarah and Michael were looking back and forth between their dad and me like they were watching a tennis match. Mom's face had gone from confused to concerned to something approaching dread. Jessica helps me plan surprises for your mother, Derek said quickly, his recovery smoother this time. That dinner was us discussing anniversary plans. Right, honey? He reached for mom's hand, but she pulled it back slightly. Our 6-month anniversary was 3 weeks ago, mom said slowly. You gave me flowers from the grocery store and said you forgot until the last minute. Derek's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. For just a moment, I saw a flash of something cold and calculating in his eyes, the same look he got when he was pretending not to hear me speak. Then the mask slipped back into place. Look, I don't know what kind of game this is, he said, his voice taking on a stern, parental tone, but I don't appreciate being interrogated by a teenager who clearly has some kind of attitude problem. Attitude problem? The words hit me like a slap. I have an attitude problem because I finally said something after months of you treating me like I don't exist. Derek, mom said quietly, what is she talking about? She's being dramatic, Derek replied, waving his hand dismissively. You know how teenagers are. Everything's the end of the world. But Sarah was staring at her dad with wide eyes. Dad, you do kind of ignore her a lot, she said hesitantly. Like, even when she's talking directly to you, you just don't answer. Michael nodded reluctantly. Yeah, it's actually pretty weird. Sometimes I wonder if you can even see her. Derek's face flushed red. That is absolutely not true. I treat everyone in this family equally. Really? I asked, feeling braver now that even his own kids were backing me up. Then why don't you know that I made honor roll this semester? Or that I've been trying to tell you about the Washington, D.C. trip for 3 weeks? Or that my birthday is next month and you've never once asked what I might want? The silence that followed was deafening. Mom was staring at Derek with an expression I'd never seen before, like she was seeing him clearly for the first time in months. Is that true? She asked him, her voice barely above a whisper. Derek opened his mouth, then closed it again. For the first time since I'd known him, he looked completely lost for words. That's when his phone buzzed with a text message, and Jessica's name lit up the screen for everyone to see. The text notification sound might as well have been a gunshot in the dead silence of our dining room. Everyone's eyes locked onto Derek's phone as it lit up on the table, Jessica's name glowing like a neon sign advertising his lies. Can't wait for tonight, face blowing a kiss, same hotel as usual. Derek lunged for the phone so fast he knocked over his wine glass, red liquid spreading across the white tablecloth like blood. But it was too late. We'd all seen it. Derek. Mom's voice was barely a whisper, but it carried the weight of a collapsing marriage. What hotel? It's not what it looks like, Derek said, clutching his phone against his chest like it might somehow undo what we'd all just witnessed. We're planning a surprise party. For your birthday. Next month. My birthday is in February, Mom said flatly. It's September. Derek's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Sarah had gone completely pale, and Michael was staring down at his plate like he could disappear into the mashed potatoes if he concentrated hard enough. Mom, I said gently, but Derek whirled on me with a fury I'd never seen before. This is all your fault, he snarled, pointing an accusing finger at me. You vindictive little brat. You couldn't stand that I was making your mother happy, so you had to destroy everything. Derek. Mom's voice cracked like a whip. Don't you dare speak to my daughter that way. Your daughter. Derek laughed, but it was an ugly, bitter sound. Your daughter has been a thorn in my side since day one. Sulking around, demanding attention, trying to turn you against me and my kids. I've been nothing but patient with her attitude, and this is how she repays me. The words hit me like physical blows, each one confirming what I'd suspected for months, that his ignoring me hadn't been accidental or subconscious. It had been deliberate, calculated, designed to make me feel exactly as small and unwanted as I'd felt. Patient? I stood up so fast my chair scraped against the floor. You call pretending I don't exist being patient? You call talking over me every time I speak being patient? I never. You can't even do it now. I was shouting now, months of swallowed words pouring out of me like a dam had burst. Even now, you can't admit what you've been doing. You've spent 6 months trying to erase me from this family, and when I finally fight back, I'm the problem. Derek's phone buzzed again. Then again. Jessica clearly wasn't done making plans for their romantic evening. Turn it off, Mom said quietly. Sarah, I can explain, Derek started, looking desperately at his daughter. Turn off the phone, Derek. Mom's voice was getting stronger, more controlled, which somehow made it scarier than if she'd been screaming. Right now. Derek hesitated for just a moment too long. His phone lit up with another message, and this time Michael caught a glimpse of it before Derek could grab it away. Dad, Michael's voice cracked on the word. The text, it says she loves you. The color drained completely from Derek's face. He looked around the table like a trapped animal, his eyes darting from face to face, finding no allies anywhere. Even his own children were staring at him with expressions of dawning horror and betrayal. "Kids, go to your rooms," Mom said, her voice eerily calm. "But Mom," I started. "All of you. Now. Your father and I need to talk." Sarah and Michael scrambled up from their chairs, but Sarah paused in the doorway, looking back at her dad with tears in her eyes. "How could you do this to Linda? She's been so good to us." Derek opened his mouth, but no words came out. His perfect family man mask had finally cracked completely, and underneath it was just a man who'd been caught in the act of destroying everything he'd claimed to love. As I headed toward the stairs, I could hear Mom's voice behind me, deadly quiet, start talking. "And Derek? Don't you dare lie to me again." I made it halfway up the stairs before I realized I couldn't just walk away. Not now. This was my mess too, and I needed to see how it ended. Sarah and Michael had already disappeared into their rooms, probably trying to process the fact that their perfect dad wasn't so perfect after all. I crept back down and pressed myself against the wall just outside the dining room, where I could hear everything but hopefully stay hidden. 6 months, Derek. Mom's voice was shaking now, the controlled facade cracking. "We've been married for 6 months. When did this start?" "Linda, please, let me explain." "When?" The single word came out like a gunshot. There was a long pause. I could picture Derek squirming in his chair, probably calculating which version of the truth would hurt him least. Before the wedding, he finally admitted, so quietly I had to strain to hear him. The sound that came from my mom was somewhere between a gasp and a sob. "Before? You were cheating on me before we even got married? It wasn't supposed to happen. Jessica and I, we have history, okay? We dated years ago, before I met you, before I married Sarah and Michael's mom. When she got hired at my company last year, we tried to just be friends, but you decided to have an affair instead." Mom's voice was getting steadier again, which was somehow more terrifying than when she'd been emotional. "While you were planning our wedding. While you were moving into my house. While you were meeting my daughter and promising to be a family. I tried to end it. I swear, Linda, I tried. But then we got married, and everything was so complicated with the kids, and you were always so focused on making everyone get along. So this is my fault." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "I was too focused on blending our families, so you had no choice but to keep sleeping with your ex-girlfriend." Derek's phone buzzed again, and I heard him swear under his breath. The timing couldn't have been worse. "Answer it," Mom said. "What?" "Answer the phone. Put it on speaker." "Linda, you don't want to. Answer it, or I will." I heard the phone click, then Jessica's voice filled the room, sultry and completely oblivious to the nuclear bomb she was about to drop on her own life. "Hey, sexy. I'm already at the hotel. Room 237, just like always. I picked up that wine you like, and I'm wearing that little black thing you bought me last week." She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was softer, more vulnerable. "Derek, I know this is complicated, but I meant what I said earlier. I do love you. I know you're married, but what we have is real, and I think it's time we stopped pretending otherwise." The silence that followed was deafening. I pressed myself harder against the wall, my heart hammering so loud I was sure they could hear it from the dining room. "Linda." Jessica's voice turned confused. "Derek, who's there? Why aren't you saying anything?" "This is Linda," my mom said, her voice deadly calm. "Derek's wife." The line went dead so fast it was almost funny. "Almost. Well," Mom said after a moment. "I guess that answers any questions about whether this was serious or not." "Linda, please," Derek's voice was desperate now, pleading. "I can end it. Right now. I'll quit my job, we'll move somewhere else, start fresh. With my daughter." Mom's voice cracked on the words. "The daughter you've been systematically trying to drive away from me." That's when I realized the real scope of what I'd unleashed. "What are you talking about?" Derek's voice had shifted from desperate to defensive. "I've never tried to drive anyone away. If anything, your daughter has been the one causing problems, acting out for attention." "Stop." The word came from Mom like a physical force. "Just stop lying, Derek. I've been watching you ignore her for months, and I told myself I was imagining it. I told myself you were just adjusting, that it would get better with time." I could hear Derek's chair scraping against the floor, probably him shifting uncomfortably. "She's a difficult kid, Linda. Moody, dramatic. I was trying to give her space." "Space?" Mom's voice rose for the first time. "You gave her so much space she might as well live in another dimension. She tries to tell us about her achievements, and you literally talk over her. She asks for help with school, and you pretend not to hear her. She sits at this table every night and watches you shower attention on your kids while treating her like she's invisible. That's not. And now I'm wondering if that was the point." Mom's voice turned cold, analytical. "Were you trying to make her feel so unwelcome that she'd want to live with her father? Is that what this was?" My stomach dropped. I hadn't even considered that possibility, but now that Mom said it out loud, it made horrible sense. My dad lived 3 states away with his new family. If I'd gotten desperate enough, frustrated enough with being ignored and excluded, I might have eventually asked to move there. Derek would get Mom all to himself, plus his own kids, without the complication of her difficult teenager. "Don't be ridiculous," Derek said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Is it ridiculous?" Mom pressed. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've been running a very careful campaign to make my daughter miserable. And I've been so blinded by playing happy family that I let you do it." The sound of breaking glass came from the dining room, followed by Derek swearing. He must have knocked something else over. "Look what you're making me do." Derek's voice was getting louder, angrier. "I'm falling apart here, Linda. Yes, I made mistakes, but I'm trying to hold this family together while dealing with a vindictive teenager who clearly resents my kids." "My daughter doesn't resent your kids." Mom snapped. "She's been nothing but kind to Sarah and Michael from day one. The only person she resents is you, and frankly, after tonight I'm starting to understand why." I heard footsteps pacing back and forth. Derek was probably doing his nervous walk thing, the one he did when clients challenged him at work. You know what the worst part is? Mom continued, her voice breaking slightly. It's not even just the cheating, Derek. It's that you made me complicit in hurting my own daughter. Every time I made excuses for you, every time I told her to be patient, every time I chose your comfort over her needs, you turned me into the kind of mother I swore I'd never be. Linda, please. She made honor roll, Derek. Again. Do you know how proud I am of her? Do you know how hard she works? And instead of celebrating that, instead of making her feel valued and loved in her own home, I've spent months watching you tear down her self-worth piece by piece. Derek's phone started ringing again. Jessica's name lit up the screen, and this time he fumbled to decline the call before Mom could stop him. She's not giving up easy, Mom observed dryly. How long has this been going on, Derek? The real timeline. Not your sanitized version. There was a long pause, and when Derek finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. 8 months. 8 months. That meant he'd been cheating on Mom before he'd even proposed. Their entire engagement had been a lie. The silence stretched so long I thought maybe they'd both left the room. Then I heard Mom laugh, a hollow, bitter sound that made my skin crawl. 8 months, she repeated, like she was testing how the words felt in her mouth. So when you proposed to me at Sarah's birthday party, when you got down on one knee in front of both our families and talked about building a life together, you were already sleeping with someone else. Linda, I never meant for it to happen. Stop saying that. The words exploded out of her. Stop acting like this just happened to you, like you're some victim of circumstance. You made choices, Derek. Every single day for 8 months, you made the choice to lie to me. I heard Derek's chair scrape again, then his footsteps as he started pacing. You want to know the truth? Fine. Yes, I was seeing Jessica when I proposed. But I meant it when I asked you to marry me. What Jessica and I have, it's just physical. It doesn't mean anything. It means everything. Mom's voice cracked. It means our entire marriage is built on a lie. It means every time you touched me, every time you said you loved me, every time you made love to me, you were thinking about her. The raw pain in my mom's voice made me want to storm back into that room and scream at Derek myself. But then I heard something that made my blood run cold, the sound of Sarah crying upstairs. Loud, heartbroken sobs that carried through the thin walls. Derek must have heard it too, because his voice immediately shifted into damage control mode. Now look what you've done. You're upsetting the children with all this drama. What I've done. Mom's voice turned dangerous. I'm upsetting the children. Not you, the man who's been cheating on their stepmother since before the wedding. Not you, who just got caught making hotel plans with his mistress at our family dinner table. Don't call her that, Derek snapped, and for the first time tonight, he sounded genuinely angry instead of just defensive. Jessica isn't my mistress. We have a real relationship. The words hung in the air like a confession. I pressed my hand over my mouth to keep from gasping out loud. A real relationship, Mom repeated slowly. With Jessica. While you're married to me. It's complicated, Linda. You wouldn't understand. Try me. Derek's pacing stopped. When he spoke again, his voice was different, colder, more calculated than I'd ever heard it. Fine. You want the truth. Jessica and I were together for 3 years before her company transferred her to Seattle. We talked about marriage, about kids, about a future together. Then she left, and I eventually met Carol, had Sarah and Michael, tried to move on. And then you met me after Carol died, Mom said quietly. And then I met you. And you were, safe. Comfortable. A ready-made family for my kids, a stable home, someone who clearly adored me and wouldn't ask too many questions. The cruelty in his words made me feel sick. I could picture my mom's face, the way it must have looked hearing the man she loved reduce their relationship to mere convenience. But then Jessica came back, Derek continued, his voice taking on a dreamy quality that made me want to throw something. Last year, when her company opened the branch here. And suddenly everything I'd been trying to forget came rushing back. She's the love of my life, Linda. I tried to stay away from her, I really did. But some things are just meant to be. So where does that leave me? Mom's voice was barely a whisper. Where does that leave my daughter? Derek was quiet for so long I thought maybe he wasn't going to answer. When he finally spoke, his words shattered what was left of my family. I think we both know this isn't working out. I couldn't breathe. The words, this isn't working out, echoed in my head like a death sentence for everything I'd known as home. I pressed myself harder against the wall, my legs suddenly feeling too weak to hold me up. What exactly are you saying, Derek? Mom's voice was eerily calm, but I could hear the tremor underneath. I'm saying maybe we rushed into this. Maybe we should have waited, made sure we were really compatible before we dragged the kids into it. Derek's voice was getting stronger now, more confident, like he'd found his footing in this disaster. Look at what just happened here tonight. Your daughter obviously can't accept me or my kids as part of her family. My daughter exposed your affair, Mom said flatly. Your daughter has been looking for ways to cause problems since day one. And honestly, Linda, you've let her. Every time she's had an attitude, every time she's been disrespectful, you've made excuses for her instead of backing me up. I felt something hot and sharp twist in my stomach. Even now, even after being caught red-handed with another woman, he was still trying to make this my fault. Disrespectful. Mom's voice was rising again. When has she been disrespectful? Give me one example. Tonight, for starters. Accusing me of ignoring her, making up stories about seeing me at restaurants. Stories that turned out to be true. Derek's pacing resumed, harder this time. I could hear his footsteps stomping back and forth across the hardwood floor. The point is, she was looking for trouble. Kids from broken homes, they do this, Linda. They sabotage their parents' new relationships because they can't handle change. Don't you dare psychoanalyze my daughter, Mom snapped. Especially when you've spent months systematically excluding her from this family. I never excluded anyone. Then prove it. Mom's voice turned sharp, challenging. Tell me one thing you know about her. One personal detail. Her favorite color, her best friend's name, what she wants to be when she grows up. Anything. The silence that followed was deafening. I found myself holding my breath, waiting for Derek to come up with something, anything that would show he'd been paying even the smallest amount of attention to me over the past 6 months. She likes books, Derek said finally, uncertainty creeping into his voice. What kind of books? Another pause. School books. For her grades. I closed my eyes, feeling that familiar sensation of being erased. He literally knew nothing about me. Not that I'd been reading the entire Harry Potter series for the 3rd time, or that I was obsessed with historical fiction, or that I'd been begging Mom to take me to the new bookstore downtown. Her favorite color is green, Mom said quietly. Forest green, specifically. Her best friend is Mia Rodriguez, and they've been planning to room together at college since middle school. She wants to study international relations and maybe work for the State Department someday. She's been taking extra language classes to prepare, Spanish and French. She made honor roll again this semester, which I mentioned at dinner, and she's been working on an application for a summer program at Georgetown University. Each fact felt like a small vindication, proof that I wasn't invisible to everyone. She also, Mom continued, her voice getting stronger, has been asking me for weeks why her new stepdad seems to hate her, and I kept telling her she was imagining things. I kept telling her to give you time, to be patient, that you were just adjusting to having a teenage stepdaughter. Linda. But she wasn't imagining it, was she? Mom's voice turned cold. You do hate her. Maybe not hate, exactly, but she's an inconvenience. A complication in your perfect little setup. That's not true. Isn't it? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you wanted a wife and a mother for your kids, but you didn't want the responsibility of being a father to mine. Derek's phone started buzzing with text messages. One after another, Jessica's name lighting up the screen like a neon sign of his betrayal. Answer it, Mom said again. Linda, please, let's just focus on us. Answer it, Derek, or I will. I heard the phone click, then Derek's voice, tight with stress. Jessica, this isn't a good time. Derek, what the hell is going on? Jessica's voice came through the speaker, high-pitched and panicked. Did your wife just answer your phone? Are you insane? It's complicated, Derek muttered. Complicated? Derek, we've been planning our future together for months. You said you were going to tell her about us, that you were going to leave her after the holidays so it wouldn't traumatize the kids too much. My blood turned to ice. They'd been planning this. Derek hadn't just been having a meaningless affair, he'd been planning to leave us. The sound that came from my mom was somewhere between a gasp and a sob. After the holidays, she whispered. Linda, I can explain. You were going to wait until after Christmas. Mom's voice was incredulous. You were going to let me buy presents, plan celebrations, let my daughter get excited about our first Christmas as a family, and then leave? Who is this? Jessica demanded from the phone. Derek, who are you talking to? This is Linda, Mom said, her voice steady despite the tears I could hear behind it. Derek's wife. The wife he was planning to abandon after Christmas so he could be with you. Derek never mentioned he was married. Jessica's voice came through the speaker, but there was something different about her tone now, less panicked, more confused. He told me he was divorced, that he was just living with his ex-wife temporarily until the custody arrangements were finalized. The words hit the dining room like a bomb. I felt my knees buckle, and I had to grab the wall to keep from sliding to the floor. He told his girlfriend that Mom was his ex-wife. That Sarah, Michael, and I were just temporary inconveniences he was stuck with until he could get his real life back. What? Mom's voice was so quiet I could barely hear it. Yeah, Jessica continued, apparently oblivious to the destruction she was causing. He said the divorce was messy, that his ex was being difficult about the kids, but that it would all be settled soon. He's been staying at my place most weekends when he tells you he's taking the kids camping or whatever. I pressed my hand over my mouth to stifle a gasp. All those weekend trips Derek had taken Sarah and Michael on, the ones he never invited me to join. He'd been leaving them with babysitters while he played house with Jessica. Derek, Mom's voice was deadly calm, is this true? The silence stretched so long I thought maybe he'd just walked out of the house. When he finally spoke, his voice was small and defeated. I had to tell her something, Linda. She wouldn't have understood the situation otherwise. What situation? Mom demanded. The situation where you married me while cheating on me. The situation where you moved into my house and let my daughter call you her stepdad while planning to abandon us. It's not that simple. Actually, it is that simple. Mom's voice exploded. You lied to everyone, Derek. You lied to me, you lied to Jessica, you lied to our children. You've been living a completely fabricated life. Derek, what is she talking about? Jessica's voice was getting shriller. You said you were divorced. I am getting divorced, Derek snapped into the phone. Or I was going to be. This is just, the timing got complicated. The timing got complicated. I could hear Jessica's voice rising to a near shriek. Derek, are you telling me you're actually married? Like, legally married? With a marriage license and everything? Jessica, calm down. Calm down. Calm down. I've been sleeping with a married man for 8 months. I've been planning a future with someone who's been lying to me every single day. I heard something crash in the dining room, probably Derek throwing something or maybe just knocking over more dishes in his panic. His carefully constructed house of lies was crumbling around him, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. Both of you, listen to me, Derek said, his voice taking on that authoritative tone he used when he was trying to regain control. Yes, the situation is messy, but we can work this out. Work this out. Mom's laugh was harsh and bitter. Derek, you've been telling your girlfriend that I'm your ex-wife while telling me that she's just a coworker. You've been planning to leave me and my daughter after Christmas like we're some kind of temporary housing arrangement. What exactly is there to work out? And you've been lying to me for months. Jessica added, her voice crackling through the phone speaker. Derek, I thought we were building something real together. I thought you were this honest, family-oriented guy who just had bad luck in love. You made me feel like such an idiot. You are an idiot, I heard Sarah's voice say suddenly, and I realized she'd been listening from the top of the stairs just like me. My dad's married to Linda, not divorced. They had a wedding and everything. I was the flower girl. The silence that followed was so complete I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. Oh my God, Jessica's voice came through the phone, shaky and horrified. There were kids at your wedding. Derek, you told me you eloped in Vegas because it wasn't a big deal. Sarah was fully in the hallway now, her face streaked with tears but her voice steady. It wasn't Vegas. It was at Riverside Park with all our families there. Linda wore Mom's pearl necklace, and Dad cried during the vows. I watched Derek's face crumble as his daughter systematically dismantled every lie he'd built. Michael appeared beside Sarah, his eyes red from crying, but his jaw set in the same stubborn line Derek got when he was angry. Dad, how could you do this? Michael's voice cracked. Linda's been so good to us. She learned to make your stupid protein smoothies even though they smell gross, and she never missed any of my games, and she always asks about our homework and actually listens to the answers. The comparison hung in the air, unspoken but obvious. Linda listened to his kids when Derek couldn't even acknowledge I existed. And she tried so hard to make us feel like a real family, Sarah added, her voice getting stronger. She made photo albums with all of us in them, and she learned all our favorite foods, and she never once made us feel like we were a burden, even when we were being bratty about missing Mom. Derek's phone was still connected to Jessica, broadcasting this family meltdown to the woman he'd been planning his future with. I could hear her crying softly through the speaker. Derek, Jessica's voice was barely a whisper, I can't be part of this. These kids sound like they love her, and you've been planning to just destroy their family. For me. Jessica, wait, Derek lunged for the phone, but she'd already hung up. The silence that followed felt like the aftermath of an earthquake. Derek stood there holding his dead phone, staring at it like he could will Jessica to call back and forgive him for turning her into an unwitting accomplice in his deception. Well, Mom said finally, her voice hollow, I guess that solves one problem. Derek whirled on her, his face flushed with a desperate kind of anger. You see what you've done? You've ruined everything. Jessica won't even talk to me now because you couldn't just handle this privately like adults. Privately. Mom's voice rose to a pitch I'd never heard before. You wanted me to handle your affair privately. While you were planning to leave me anyway. I was trying to do the right thing. I was trying to wait until after the holidays so the kids wouldn't associate Christmas with trauma. How considerate, Mom said dryly. Planning the destruction of our family around the holiday calendar. That's when I noticed something that made my blood run cold. Derek was looking around the room with a calculating expression, like he was mentally cataloging what belonged to him. His eyes lingered on the expensive coffee maker he'd bought last month, the leather chair he'd insisted on putting in the corner, the flat-screen TV that had replaced our smaller one when he moved in. You know what? Derek said suddenly, his voice taking on that businesslike tone he used during work calls, maybe this is for the best. Maybe we can handle this like mature adults and figure out a fair division of assets. Assets? I found myself stepping into the doorway without realizing I'd moved. You're already thinking about dividing up our stuff. Derek's eyes flicked over me dismissively, back to his old pattern of pretending I barely existed. This doesn't concern you. Like hell it doesn't, I shot back, surprising myself with my own vehemence. This is my house too. This is my family you're talking about destroying. Your family. Derek's laugh was cruel. Sweetheart, we were never a family. We were just a temporary arrangement that didn't work out. The words hit me like a physical blow, but before I could respond, Sarah stepped forward, her young face fierce with protective anger. Don't you dare talk to her like that, she said, her voice shaking with emotion. Just because you're a liar doesn't mean you get to be mean to people who actually cared about making this work. For the first time in 6 months, someone in Derek's biological family had defended me against him. The moment felt monumental and heartbreaking all at once. Derek's face went white as Sarah's words hit him. For a split second, I saw something flicker across his features, maybe shame, maybe just shock that his own daughter had turned against him. But it was quickly replaced by that cold, calculating look I was starting to recognize as his true face. Sarah, you don't understand the complexities of adult relationships, he said, his voice taking on that condescending tone he used when he wanted to shut down a conversation. This situation is more complicated than... No, Dad. Michael stepped up beside his sister, his voice stronger than I'd ever heard it. It's really not complicated. You cheated on Linda. You lied to everyone. You were planning to leave us all so you could be with someone else. And you've been horrible to her, Sarah added, pointing at me. We all saw it, Dad. We just didn't want to believe you were doing it on purpose. Derek's jaw tightened, and I watched him cycle through what looked like different strategies in his head. Finally, he seemed to settle on righteous indignation. I have been nothing but supportive of this family, he said, his voice rising. I moved into this house, I've been paying half the mortgage, I've included everyone in family activities. You literally planned a vacation to Disney World last month and didn't book a ticket for me, I interrupted, the memory still stinging. You said it was an oversight, but you somehow remembered to book tickets for yourself, Mom, Sarah, Michael, and even Sarah's friend Emma. Derek's mouth opened and closed like he was trying to find a reasonable explanation for something that had no reasonable explanation. That's not. I was going to add you later, he said weakly. The booking system was acting up. For 3 weeks. Mom's voice was dangerous now. The booking system was acting up for 3 weeks while you finalized every other detail of the trip. And what about my birthday dinner? I pressed, feeling braver now that everyone was seeing through his lies. You made reservations at that fancy steakhouse for your whole family to celebrate Sarah making JV soccer, but when my birthday came 2 weeks later, you suddenly decided we should keep it simple with takeout pizza. You like pizza, Derek said defensively, but his voice lacked conviction. I like pizza, I agreed. But Sarah got a 3-course meal with dessert and a speech about how proud you were of her achievements. I got a pepperoni pizza and you spent the entire dinner talking about Michael's upcoming basketball tryouts. Sarah was staring at her father with growing horror. Dad, is that true? Derek's phone started buzzing again, not Jessica this time, but what looked like work calls. Probably people wondering why he'd missed whatever meeting or dinner he was supposed to be at tonight instead of having this family meltdown. I need to take this, he said, reaching for his phone like it was a lifeline. No. Mom's voice cut through the air like a blade. You don't get to take work calls right now, Derek. You don't get to pretend this conversation isn't happening. This call could be important. More important than the family you've been systematically destroying. Mom asked. More important than explaining to your children why you've been planning to abandon them. Derek's face flushed red, and for the first time tonight, I saw real anger flash in his eyes, not the defensive panic he'd been showing, but genuine fury at being cornered. You know what, Linda? You want the truth. Fine. Yes, I was planning to leave after Christmas. Yes, I've been unhappy in this arrangement. But you want to know why? His voice was getting louder, more aggressive, and I instinctively took a step back. Because living with a hostile teenager who resents my children has made this house feel like a war zone. Because you're so busy defending her attitude that you can't see how she's been undermining our relationship from day one. The accusation hung in the air like poison gas, and I felt my chest tighten with familiar shame and self-doubt. Maybe he was right. Maybe I had been hostile, resentful, difficult to live with. But then Sarah's voice cut through my spiral. That's not true, and you know it. Sarah's words hit Derek like a physical blow, and I watched something dark and ugly flicker across his face. For a moment, the mask slipped completely, and I saw the man he really was underneath all the false charm. Sarah, you need to stay out of adult conversations, he snapped, his voice harsher than I'd ever heard him speak to his daughter. No, Dad. Someone needs to tell the truth here. Sarah's voice was shaking, but she stood her ground. She wasn't hostile. She tried so hard to fit in with us. Remember the first week you moved in? She made that welcome banner for Michael and me, and she learned how to make your stupid keto breakfast even though it smells like feet. And she always offers to help with our homework, Michael added, his voice getting stronger. Even when you're sitting right there ignoring her. She's actually really good at math, Dad. Better than you. Derek's face was turning an alarming shade of red. You kids don't understand the dynamics. We understand that you're lying, Sarah interrupted. Again. Just like you lied about Jessica being a coworker. Just like you lied about working late. Just like you lied about loving Linda. That last accusation hit Mom like she'd been slapped. She actually staggered backward a step, her hand flying to her chest. I do love your mother, Derek said quickly, seeming to realize he'd pushed too far. Linda, you have to know that what Jessica and I have, it's different. It doesn't change how I feel about you. How you feel about me. Mom's voice was barely a whisper. Derek, you were planning to divorce me. You told another woman I was your ex-wife. You've been living a completely fabricated life for months. Because the real life was too complicated. The words exploded out of him like he'd been holding them back for months. Do you have any idea what it's like trying to blend families with a teenager who questions everything I do? Who looks at me like I'm some kind of invader in her precious little world? I felt the familiar shame creeping up my throat, but then I remembered something that made my blood run cold. Is that why you've been trying to turn Mom against me? I asked quietly. Derek's head snapped toward me, and for the first time tonight, he looked genuinely afraid. What are you talking about? The little comments. The suggestions. My voice was getting stronger as the pieces clicked into place. Like when you told Mom maybe I should spend more weekends at Dad's house because I seemed stressed. Or when you said I might be happier at boarding school because I was too mature for the local high school. Mom's face went white. Derek, you said those things because you were concerned about her adjustment. He wasn't concerned about my adjustment, I said, the truth crystallizing in my mind like ice forming on a window. He was trying to get rid of me. Weren't you, Derek? The silence stretched so long I could hear the kitchen clock ticking from the next room. Derek's eyes darted between Mom and me, and I could practically see him calculating whether he could still lie his way out of this. That's completely ridiculous, he said finally, but his voice cracked on the words. Is it? I pressed. Because now that I think about it, every single suggestion you've made about my future has involved me living somewhere else. Summer camp, boarding school, extended visits with Dad, that character-building wilderness program you found online. Mom was staring at Derek with an expression of dawning horror. Oh my God. You were trying to get her out of the house. Derek's phone started ringing again, Jessica's name lighting up the screen like a neon accusation. This time, he declined the call so violently I thought he might throw the phone across the room. This is insane, he said, his voice getting desperate. You're all turning this into some kind of conspiracy theory. I was just trying to give everyone options. Options that all involved my daughter disappearing from our lives, Mom finished, her voice deadly quiet. While you planned your future with Jessica. The house phone started ringing then, a shrill sound that cut through the tension like a knife. Mom moved to answer it, probably grateful for any interruption to this nightmare, but Derek lunged forward to stop her. Don't answer that, he said quickly. It could be anyone. But it was too late. Mom had already picked up the receiver, and I could hear a woman's voice on the other end, not Jessica, someone older. Linda. This is Carol's mother. Derek's late mother-in-law. I'm so sorry to bother you, but I've been trying to reach Derek all evening. Jessica called me looking for him, and she was very upset. Something about him lying to her about being divorced. The blood drained from Derek's face as his dead wife's mother's voice filled the room, loud enough for all of us to hear. The color drained from Derek's face so completely I thought he might faint. His dead wife's mother, Sarah and Michael's grandmother, had just called looking for him because his mistress had contacted her in desperation. Mrs. Chen, Derek's voice came out as a strangled whisper. I can explain. Put it on speaker, Mom said quietly, but her tone left no room for argument. Derek's hand shook as he pressed the button, and Mrs. Chen's voice filled our destroyed dining room like the voice of judgment itself. Derek, what is this young woman talking about? She called me crying, saying you'd been lying to her about being married, that you told her Linda was your ex-wife. I'm very confused. Sarah let out a small sob. Mrs. Chen wasn't just Derek's former mother-in-law, she was the closest thing to a grandmother that Sarah and Michael had left. The idea that Derek's lies had reached even her seemed to break something in Sarah's composure. Grandma Chin. Sarah's voice was small and broken. It's me. Oh, sweetheart. Are you all right? This Jessica person was very upset, talking about hotels and secret relationships. I didn't understand what she meant. Michael stepped closer to the phone, his young face aged by the night's revelations. Grandma, Dad's been cheating on Linda. With Jessica from his work. And he was planning to leave us. The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long I wondered if the call had dropped. When Mrs. Chen finally spoke again, her voice was ice cold. Derek Vincent Morrison, is this true? Derek's full name spoken in that tone made him physically flinch. I'd never seen him look so small, so utterly defeated. Mrs. Chen, the situation is complicated. It's a yes or no question, Derek. Have you been unfaithful to Linda? Another silence. Derek's eyes darted around the room like a trapped animal looking for an escape route that didn't exist. Yes, he whispered finally. The sound that came through the phone was somewhere between a gasp and a growl. And you told this woman that Linda was your ex-wife? I had to tell her something. You had to lie about the woman who has been caring for my grandchildren like they were her own. Mrs. Chen's voice was rising, and even through the phone speaker, her fury was terrifying. The woman who sends me pictures of Sarah's soccer games and Michael's school plays. The woman who called me personally to ask what Carol's favorite flowers were so she could plant them in a garden as a memorial. I'd forgotten about that. Last spring, Mom had spent an entire afternoon on the phone with Mrs. Chen, learning about Derek's first wife so she could honor her memory properly. She'd planted white roses, Carol's favorites, in a small memorial garden by the kitchen window. Derek looked like he was going to be sick. Mrs. Chen, please, if you could just let me explain. Explain what? How you've been dishonoring Carol's memory by lying and cheating. How you've been planning to abandon the children she died trying to bring into this world. Sarah burst into fresh tears at the mention of her mother, and I watched Derek's face crumble as he realized the full scope of what he destroyed. This wasn't just about our blended family anymore. He'd tainted the memory of his first marriage, betrayed the trust of his children's extended family, and turned his mistress into an unwitting accomplice in his web of lies. The children are listening, Mrs. Chen, Mom said gently, her voice somehow calm despite the chaos around her. Good. They should hear this. Mrs. Chen's voice softened slightly when she addressed Sarah and Michael directly. My darlings, I want you to know that none of this is your fault, and Linda will always be family to me, no matter what your father has done. Derek made a strangled sound, like he was choking on his own shame. Grandma Chen, Derek's voice was desperate now, please don't turn my children against me. I made mistakes, but I'm still their father. Their father? Mrs. Chen's laugh was bitter. A father protects his children's stability. A father doesn't plan to uproot their lives for his own selfish desires. Carol would be ashamed of what you've become. Derek flinched like he'd been physically struck. Don't you dare bring Carol into this. Carol is already in this. Mrs. Chen's voice cracked with emotion. Every choice you make reflects on her memory, on the family she died creating. And now you've dragged some poor woman into your lies, made her an unwitting participant in destroying the very family Carol wanted for her children. That's when I heard car doors slamming outside. Multiple car doors. Derek's face went white as he rushed to the window, and the curse that escaped his lips told me everything I needed to know. Who is it? Mom asked, though her voice suggested she already suspected. Jessica, Derek whispered. And, someone else. A man. The doorbell rang, followed immediately by aggressive knocking. Jessica's voice carried through the front door, high-pitched and furious. Derek. I know you're in there. We need to talk. Oh, this should be interesting. Mrs. Chen's voice came through the phone speaker with grim satisfaction. Derek, I suggest you answer that door and face the consequences of your actions. The knocking became more insistent, and then a man's voice joined Jessica's. Open the door, Derek. You owe my daughter an explanation. Sarah grabbed Michael's hand, both of them looking terrified. This had escalated far beyond a family argument. Now it was becoming a public spectacle with Jessica and what sounded like her father demanding answers at our front door. I'm not answering that, Derek said, backing away from the window like Jessica and her father might break it down. Then I will, Mom said, moving toward the hallway. Linda, no. Derek lunged after her, grabbing her arm. You don't understand. Jessica's father he's not a reasonable man. He has a temper. Mom yanked her arm free, her eyes flashing with something dangerous. A temper. Derek, are you seriously worried about someone else's temper right now? After what you put all of us through. The pounding on the door intensified, and Jessica's voice rose to near hysteria. Derek Vincent Morrison, you come out here right now. You don't get to ruin my life and then hide behind your fake wife. Fake wife? Mom repeated slowly, her voice dropping to a deadly whisper. Through the phone, Mrs. Chen's sharp intake of breath was audible. Did that young woman just call Linda a fake wife? Derek looked like he wanted to disappear into the floorboards. Jessica's upset. She doesn't mean. Derek. The man's voice, Jessica's father, boomed through the door. My daughter says you've been lying to her for months. Says you told her you were divorced. You get out here and explain yourself like a man. That's when I noticed Sarah was filming everything on her phone. Sarah, what are you doing? Derek's voice was sharp with panic. Documenting, Sarah replied matter-of-factly, not lowering her phone. In case we need evidence later. For lawyers or whatever. The practicality of a 13-year-old thinking about legal documentation while her family imploded around her was somehow the most heartbreaking thing I'd witnessed all night. Derek made a grab for Sarah's phone, but Michael stepped between them, his young face set in determined lines. Don't touch her, Dad. She's not doing anything wrong. Those are my children too. Derek snapped into the phone, apparently forgetting that Mrs. Chen was still listening to every word. Then act like their father, Mrs. Chen replied coldly, and stop this circus before you traumatize them further. The knocking stopped suddenly, and Jessica's voice turned ominous. Fine. If you won't come out, we're coming in. The front door handle rattled, and I heard the unmistakable sound of a key turning in the lock. How does she have a key? Mom's voice was barely controlled. Derek's face went ashen. I gave her one. For emergencies. Emergencies, Mom repeated flatly. Or for when you wanted her to feel like she lived here too. Before Derek could answer, the front door swung open and Jessica stormed in, followed by an older man who had to be her father. Jessica's mascara was streaked down her cheeks, and her father's face was thunderous. There you are, you lying piece of, Jessica's tirade cut off abruptly when she saw all of us standing there. Her eyes swept over Mom, then Sarah and Michael, finally landing on me. Oh God. There really are kids. You weren't lying about that part. Jessica, please, Derek started, but her father cut him off. 8 months, the older man said, his voice dangerously quiet. 8 months you've been telling my daughter you were divorced, that you were ready to build a real life with her. And I was. Derek's voice cracked with desperation. I am. This is just, complicated. Complicated? Jessica's laugh was hysterical. Derek, you're married. Actually married. With children who call this woman Mom. I never called him Dad, I said quietly, and everyone turned to look at me. Not once in 6 months. I guess I knew, somehow, that he wasn't planning to stick around. Derek's face crumbled at my words, and I saw something break in his expression, maybe the last pretense that he'd been trying to do right by anyone. Through the phone speaker, Mrs. Chen's voice cut through the chaos. Jessica, dear, this is Carol's mother. Derek's first wife. I'm sorry you've been caught up in his lies. Jessica's knees seemed to buckle, and she sank onto our couch. His first wife. How many families does he have? Just the one that mattered, Derek muttered, so quietly I almost missed it. But Mom heard it. And Sarah heard it. And Michael heard it too. Just the one that mattered. Mom's voice was ice. Derek, are you saying that our family, our marriage, doesn't matter? Derek looked around the room at all the faces staring at him, his children, his wife, his mistress, and her father, and something in him just gave up. No, he said finally, his voice hollow. It doesn't. Not the way it should. I'm sorry, Linda. I'm sorry to all of you. But I can't keep pretending to be someone I'm not. The honesty was brutal, but it was also somehow freeing. After months of gaslighting and lies, Derek had finally told the truth. Thank you, Mom said quietly. For finally being honest. Jessica was crying quietly now, the reality of the situation sinking in. I'm so sorry, she whispered to Mom. I never meant. I thought he was divorced. I thought I was helping him heal from a bad marriage. You were a victim too, Mom said gently, and I felt a surge of admiration for her grace under impossible circumstances. Derek's phone buzzed with a text from his work. He glanced at it and laughed bitterly. They're asking why I missed the Henderson meeting. Like any of that matters now. It's going to matter when you're looking for a place to live, Mom said calmly. You have until Sunday to get your things out of my house. Derek nodded, looking older than I'd ever seen him. What about Sarah and Michael? What about them? Mom asked. They're welcome here as long as they want to stay. They're my family too. Sarah was still filming, tears streaming down her face, but her voice was steady when she spoke. We want to stay with Linda. She's the only real parent we have left. And just like that, it was over. Derek had lost everything, his marriage, his mistress, his children's respect, and his carefully constructed lies. But somehow, the rest of us had found something true in the wreckage. We were still a family. Just not the one he planned to destroy.